10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Good evening, everybody. This is the Tuesday, September 20th Committee of Public Health and Safety. It's good to see everybody. If everybody's okay with it, I think all the resolutions could be put on a consent agenda. I'll read them, and you let me know if any of them should come off of a consent. So RS 2022-1744, Roden, Gamble, Syracuse, and others, approves a grant contract between the Metro Board of Health and the Mental Health Cooperative to provide expertise and staff in emergency behavioral health care to support the launch and pilot year of the Nashville Police Department's co-response model, Nashville Partners in Care. RS 2022-1745, Roden, Gamble, Syracuse, and others, approves a grant contract between the Metro Board of Health and the Mental Health Cooperative to provide funds to operate a 24/7 mental health co-op treatment center to urgent mental health care alternatives to the emergency room or jail. 2022-1746, Roden, Gamble, Syracuse, and others, approves a contract for services between the Metro Board of Health and Neighborhood Health, Inc., to provide homeless individuals with medical and dental services at 2 or more clinics in or near downtown Nashville. RS 2022-1770, Gamble, Syracuse, Hancock, and others, approves a grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to the Metro Nashville Fire Department to protect the health and safety of the public and firefighting personnel against fire and fire-related hazards. RS 2022-1771, Gamble and Syracuse, approves a hazardous materials emergency preparedness grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metro Office of Emergency Management to stay abreast of emerging trends and deliver the latest and most pertinent training possible to increase the effectiveness of safety and efficiently handling hazardous materials. And RS 2022-1772, Gamble, Syracuse, Allen, and Welsh, approves Amendment 1 to a grant from a Step Ahead Foundation of Middle Tennessee, Inc., to the Metro Board of Health to provide reimbursement for certain costs associated with providing long-lasting reversible contraception. Do any of those need to come off of a consent agenda? Seeing none.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion before we pass these in mass? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? 8 in favor and 0 against for the resolutions. Thank you, everybody. And we will move on to...
Move to adjourn.
Wait a second.
Just kidding.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on to bills on second reading, the first of which is BL 2022-1383, as amended. Syracuse, Evans, Allen, and others amends the Metro Code to prohibit smoking and the use of vapor products in certain age-restricted venues. Can I get a motion?
Second.
Second. All right. So we have 4 amendments proposed and a late amendment. I guess we will. I guess I'll speak briefly since this is my bill. As you all know, the state has now authorized local municipalities to be able to regulate age-restricted venues, 21 and up, and that's what this does pursuant to state law. You will recall last time that the amendment that I did put on there pushes the effective date to March 1 of 2023. So that's what it is currently as amended. So it does give these businesses some time to implement any structural update, overhang, or whatnot for folks to step outside and have a smoke before they go back in, that kind of thing. So that's where we are. We'll take the first amendment, which is my amendment. Can I get a motion?
Move the amendment?
Second.
All right, thank you very much. So this amendment, this is my amendment. This was not meant to harm hookah bars, which is more of a cultural establishment. So this carves out hookah bars, and it uses the same exact language that the state used when they carved out cigar bars. So it just mirrors that language. So is there any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, can I get a motion on the amendment?
Already moved.
We already moved. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any against? Thanks very much. Okay, so Amendment 2 is is Councilmember Parker's. Can I get a motion on?
Move Amendment 2.
Second.
Second? Thank you very much. Councilman, this is your amendment.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me, though I'm not a member of this committee. So I submitted this amendment in response to concerns I heard from constituents who work at establishments where smoking is currently allowed, constituents who are patrons of that bar and those places, and I'm also a regular patron of a few of the places left in town that do allow smoking. So in particular, Santa's Pub, Batter's Box. I also had Fran's in mind. These are very long-standing establishments that have a really strong culture around them. It's a place that people do go and they drink and shoot pool and sing karaoke and smoke cigarettes. And my goal with this was to allow those sort of establishments to continue operating as they have, while preventing new establishments from opening up that would, as your bill intends, prevent smoking from happening indoors in those type of establishments. So happy to answer any questions about this amendment. If committee members have those.
Thank you. Comments? Councilman?
So we're grandfathering. What are the criteria to be grandfathered?
The date was that we went with, is Hannah in here?
September 1st.
September 1st. So what we didn't want to do is provide a window where folks could go in and say, oh, all of a sudden we're going to start smoking in here next week, sort of in violation of the spirit of the regulations that have been proposed. So we did kind of backdate it to September 1st.
My question was more, have they had to have been in business for 10 years or?
Those parameters are not established in this amendment. It's as of September 1st. If you're in operation and you allow smoking, this amendment would allow you to continue doing that.
Councilman?
Thank you. Appreciate it. First of all, I'm thrilled to see council members Parker and Swope standing shoulder to shoulder on this. Well done. I have mixed feelings on everything having to do with this, but I guess I'm having trouble separating the idea of hookah bars from the idea of dive bars. They're both they're both. The arguments for them are very similar, and against them are very similar. First of all, Ms. Darby, we're allowed to, under the state statute, carve out exceptions like this?
We've received some guidance from the legal department saying that they think that we can carve out exceptions like this.
Okay. So, it's probably just on the bill as a whole. Okay, thank you.
I just had a question for the sponsor about how would you envision, I guess, managing, or who would be managing kind of the sales process? Would it be something the health department would be going back and looking at over time and,
The sales?
Well, if a venue is sold and it's going back to...
I believe that would be sort of like codes has on file, business permits with the city, those things can be reviewed.
Anybody else? Councilwoman?
Does the permit go with the person who owns it or the building?
I don't believe there's a permit in this case. We're not establishing a permitting situation. It's simply that these folks would be grandfathered out of this regulation.
If they moved the establishment, it wouldn't go with them to the next establishment.
Is Hannah present? Hannah helped me draft this.
The amendment does not allow it to go to the next establishment. It basically says that you would be, if you were in business as of September 1, 2022, you're grandfathered in. If after that date you transfer ownership of your business or you sell the property or what have you, then that grandfather exemption would be extinguished.
So if Santa's Pub, say, opened Santa's Pub 2, that Santa's Pub 2 couldn't smoke, but Santa's Pub 1 could. And if he opened up another one adjacent or even anything, it's not allowed to smoke, just that one building, correct?
It needed to be in business as of September 1st, 2022.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
The committee members? Well, I'll make the comment that I appreciate my colleagues always. Both grandfathering amendments completely gut the intent of this. If you're going to do this, then the hospitality workers and musicians that are in there are are not protected, and that is the intent of this. So where I can't support any of the grandfathering of existing businesses. That's my comment. Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate your comments and all of the emails and everything that we've received on this issue. I guess my concern is, while we are wanting to protect workers and goers to these establishments, how do we do that without penalizing owners that have this business model that they've been doing, many for 20, 30 years now, that they have to change their business model? I don't think it's fair that we would penalize business owners who have this business model, and I appreciate the grandfathering because that allows those who have established their business and their business model to continue, but any new businesses then would have to follow these regulations in order to improve smoke-free in Nashville. So I appreciate this amendment and support it for that reason.
Just ask a philosophical question that you don't have to answer, but how does the protection of folks who work in the bars differ from the protection of the people who work in the hookah bars?
Hookah bars is not an establishment that has alcohol per se, not the ones that are being carved out here. This isn't a bar. It's more of a cultural establishment. Those are the ones that would be carved out of this. My comment to that would be that in 2007, it was the same argument when the state passed cessation of smoking in businesses. And businesses were afraid that they were going to be shut down because their clients wouldn't show up. The statistics and data is crystal clear that it was the exact opposite. These businesses' revenues actually went up because they got clientele, new customers that they wouldn't have gotten before. So that's just those are the facts. But yes.
So my response to that is those weren't age-restricted businesses. Those were more restaurants and family businesses where smoking would be an issue, where these are 21 and older establishments where people have a choice. So.
Health Department got anything on the grandfathering?
Well, the intention, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, is to protect the workers primarily. And make a valid point that these are older people, 21 and up, that's old, not anymore than me. But it's also very true that places whose primary clientele is older people that went smoke-free after the Non-Smoker Protection Act passed had an increase in business to a large extent. The same people will come, they go out on the porch, they go on the patio, they go out in the parking lot and they have a smoke and come back. They go there largely because they like the place. They're used to having to smoke outside. A lot of them have to smoke outside at home, at work. You know, it's not that unusual anymore. So I understand the fear of the folks that that's always the way they've done it. They're afraid that any change will jeopardize their business. I get that. Based on what we saw when the Non-Smoker Protection Act passed, it is an inflated fear as a general rule.
I just want to say that, anecdotally, something that gave me comfort with bringing this forward was 5 years ago in East Nashville, which is the part of town I know best, we had, I'd say half the bars were still smoking. I think Three Crow, Beyond the Edge, what is now Lakeside, sort of all were smoking establishments, and it really was, I know one argument that I've heard is, you can go to a place that doesn't have smoking. That used to be a lot harder than it is now. It's considerably easier to choose to work at, perform at, or patronize a non-smoking establishment now. And if it was still the case that half the bars in my community were smoking, I probably would not bring this forward. But the tide has really turned from when I was a young man and when I first started smoking cigs, because everybody was smoking everywhere, It's really not the case anymore. I think this is really kind of a handful of establishments that have been operating in the community for a long time that I'm trying to protect here and that we're trying to protect here. And so that's why I'm comfortable with it, is just that tide has really shifted, and I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of the number of these businesses, and I think closing off that possibility for the future is certainly another step in the right direction there, so.
So I agree with Councilman Parker, and the attrition is going to phase out these bars over time. And it's probably, like you said, I spoke to my 30s, my 50s. I'm choosing not to go to places that smoke. But however, I like that they're still there for those who do. I'm not probably going to go there, but do we have an idea how many bars roughly we're talking about that would be added in under this grandfather law or grandfather?
I have heard figures. I'm wondering if the health department has any.
So,
Just a guess would be
yeah,
close.
hang on just a second. So, we don't have a scientific count of how many it is. Hughes folks that have their territories for restaurant inspections, they reviewed everybody that's on their list, and we tried our best to make a list of the ones that are 21 and up. Now, some of them are 21 and up, but don't allow smoking, which is a question I'd like to pose for, are the ones that don't currently allow smoking grandfathered in also, or just the ones that allow smoking now?
That's not my interpretation of this bill. You would have to allow smoking as of September 1st under this amendment in order to be counted. So, again, you couldn't go out next week and say, we're going to start having smoking now.
And in total, Mr. Chairman, it was about, I want to say 150 across the county, but a lot of them do not allow smoking. They're 21 and up for some other reason besides allowing smoking. I'm not really sure how many of them smoke. I wish I could understand.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I don't know who this question's for, but if we don't know which bars allow smoking, how do we decide which ones are allowed to allow smoking?
They declare themselves to be, well, the way it is now, before any of this, they declare themselves to be 21 and up only. You can't let a minor into the premises. And if you do that, you can let people smoke. At that point, it becomes their call. They can either smoke or not. You can only smoke in 21 and up establishments.
Right.
So what they declare to us is whether they're 21 and up or not.
But if we do this and you're 21 and up, but you're not allowed to start allowing smoking next week, how do we know that they allowed smoking last week?
Oh, that's a good question. We'd have to sort that out.
It's not in the amendment as drafted, but I had initially proposed sort of a voluntary, they would send a letter to put on file with the health department declaring we allowed smoking as of this date, and therefore we're seeking this grandfathering. That's not in the amendment, though. That might be able to be accomplished
I mean,
administratively.
we would have to make some differentiation, certainly.
So like, we swear that we pinky swear that we were allowing smoking on September 1st.
But if they're not allowing smoking now, why would they start?
I'm just asking a question. I don't even know where I am on this, but yeah.
No, I'm standing with my fellow council member, Mr. Parker.
Question?
Yes, Councilman.
How long do you think it would take the health department to determine what bars we're actually talking about?
Which ones actually smoke?
Yes, pretty well.
I think probably most of the field folks on the staff have a good idea which ones in their territories allow smoking already, because they check for the compliance with the Non-Smoker Protection Act right now every time they go. So, but, I mean, if they allow smoking and they're 21 and up, they're in compliance with the Non-Smoker Protection Act. So, but I think just from going in and out of them, they know which ones smoke.
My purpose of that question is, it would really,
That's where we came up with.
I think, make some of us feel more comfortable if we knew exactly how many are being grandfathered. Is it 50 or 150? And so I was wondering, how long would it take to really kind of get your arms around it?
We just, probably, I mean, in a couple of days, we could have them review their territory list, and they would, I mean, if they actually went out and canvassed, that would take quite some time, and wouldn't be very productive time as far as getting the rest of their work done. But they did know which ones were 21 and up. I think, they have a good idea of which ones are smoking. So I think in a couple of days they could review their territory list and come up with a swag at least on how many it is.
I personally would like that swag done. I don't know if we're going to pass this tonight or not, but even if we, whatever we do, I think that'd be an interesting piece of data to have.
In that vein, is it possible that we could ask the restaurants to submit for some type of variance? And I know that's the wrong word, but I mean, wouldn't that be an easier way, instead of your guys having to do it, to ask the restaurants to say, we would like to be the exception, and then we have a list, right? I think that, I'm asking actually, that didn't sound like a question, but that was a question. Is that feasible?
There's, how many of them are there? There's like, what, 12, 13,000?
No, it's about 8,000.
8,000. So there's 8,000 of them, which they regulate. Bars,
Oh,
restaurants,
okay,
all that.
yeah.
Not the smoking. Didn't mean to panic anybody. So, but I think we can reach most of them. We should have contacts for most of those folks, and we could, what is the question? We ask them, will you declare yourself to be a 21 and up smoking establishment if this passes, or what's the?
Well, I think there's a compromise somewhere in there, maybe not that exactly, but it does take the workload off of them to say you have between now and, I don't know, 6 months to comply, and if you want to be on that list, then you have to ask to be on that list, and that would give us a finite number.
I mean, that is very much in the spirit of what I was hoping to accomplish here, and I think that would make administration much easier for the health department if you had a positive list of people who had declared that we were doing this at this time. Your folks that are out in the field said, yeah, we agree that seems to be the case. If there's one that you've got a question about, you can talk with them about it, but to have a positive list rather than just sort of an open thing.
Chair, would we need to add that to the amendment if that is the case? Ms. Darby?
It would need to be a new amendment that is filed. We don't do amendments of amendments.
Well, yeah. Or, I mean, we haven't, this amendment is not on the bill. So, and, I mean, it's not on the bill. It depends on the sponsor of the amendment of how we deal with that. Right? So it's not going to be an amendment if it's not an amendment on the bill. Say that 20 times.
Councilmember Bullock?
Yeah, I was originally just wanting to get an answer to the question how long. I think you finally said 2 days. Is that how long it would take you to acquire this information?
Well, to get an idea, I don't
assessment,
think that
but
would
not
be hard and fast.
Yeah, and you don't know the answer to how long would be a hard and fast answer?
Well, I mean, anyone they had a doubt on, that would be a dead trip out to an establishment, I guess, to find
So
out.
you have an answer as to how long that would take?
That might take 2 weeks. I mean,
So maximum of 2 weeks, you think?
yeah, I think.
And I think what we're trying to figure out here, Chair, is how many of these actually exist. And I'm a little concerned about doing something that would trigger more interest in making it exist where it doesn't right now over, if we're going to grandfather those who do it, okay, let's grandfather those who do it. Let's not create a scenario where people say, oh, well, I better start smoking now if we want to ever consider doing this in the future. So I'm a little concerned about raising that flag during this process. But it seems to me like they got a pretty good handle on this individually if they could collectively get that data. So with that and the fact that this is not on the amendment, is it appropriate to move this down the road, or if that's what we want to do, Councilman? Is it appropriate to defer this to get that data so we put it on the amendment?
Well, I mean, the legislation is on second reading. I don't believe it could be amended on third, so, I mean, that would be, the sponsor of the bill if we were going to do that, I would hope would agree to
Is it amendable on third without suspending the rules?
No.
We're on the Amendment 2. Just real quick, I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but Director Darby, can you help us differentiate between Amendment 2 and Amendment 4, both grandfather in. But I think it's helpful at this point, as we debate Amendment 2, to understand what the two grandfathering amendments do.
Certainly. Amendment 2, we've just discussed, that would grandfather in the establishments that were in existence on September 1st, and would also require that the grandfathering would, go away if the building was, or if the business was sold. Then Amendment 4 is another grandfathering provision that sets the date of October 1st, 2022, and does not include the other language.
I just want to level set on these two grandfathering amendments that we do have. So what am I hearing on data collection? Is that something that you all are interested in doing before we move forward?
Well, if it's the will of the council that we need to have that information before you feel comfortable making a decision, we'll do our dead level best to get it.
I still have your original concern that the whole purpose of the original bill was to eliminate these 21 and up and protect the people who actually worked on, promoting this too. And the continued maybe administrative nightmare on the part of staff once it's passed. I think just finding out how many they are. I was really involved in the Non-Smoker Protection Act when it passed, when I was with the State Health Department. It's not just the ones that are in compliance that cause the problems. It's chasing down everybody calling in the next morning. And if we've got 20 calls saying this place is smoking when they're not supposed to, we have to check all those out. So, I like the original bill without the amendment, so maybe I'm not the best one to be asking these questions.
Sure. I guess I will pose a question to the committee for discussion is what is the intent of getting data to know exactly how many? I mean, what's the point? Once this ostensibly goes into effect, it's up to the health department from there to determine whether they are a age-restricted venue that allows smoking or not.
Yeah. The health department knows that information, and I think we're good.
You all at least know how to determine that.
But is there something in the amendment that would give them the authority to make that determination and create that list of people who are grandfathered in? That would be fine with me.
I guess my question would be, what's the efficacy of having that? How does that change the intent?
It's like fairness to me.
I was going to say, it might be interesting to know exactly who we are putting out of business.
Well, that's subjective, of course. Well,
I think the intent's to try to keep them in business, isn't it?
well, this is what my subjective comment is that that's what it does.
I know, but it's a subjective subject.
Are we cool? We're going to take the amendment. Is there any other comments on the amendment?
You want to take it for a vote?
Yeah. So all in favor of Councilmember Parker's amendment? Let's do hands since I know we're going to have a mixed bag here. If you're in favor of Councilmember Parker's amendment. All right, so 5 in favor, and against would be 2, and abstentions?
I'd like to get the information.
3, I think.
You want for a vote?
Who's abstaining? 1, 2.
Oh, Brandon, you're not abstaining?
I'm saying.
You are abstaining. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we do have 10 people. All right. So amendment passes 5 for, 2 against, 3 not in favor. I guess when we get to Councilmember Swope's amendment, we're going to have to. I guess we'll see what he does then.
Amendment 3?
So amendment 3 is by Councilmember O'Connell. Is he out there?
He's on his way. I can.
Traffic's terrible.
I mean, he was on his way from another room.
He's in the building. Yeah.
Traffic's terrible.
You meant traffic in the hall.
Always a mess.
Always a mess.
In the committee meeting.
There he is. We are on Amendment 3. Can I get a motion for Councilmember
So moved.
O'Connell's?
Second.
Second, okay. Councilmember.
All right, and this is a timely filed?
Correct.
Yeah, so this one, I'll say, we have been starting, Councilmember Syracuse knows this, I was an early co-sponsor of the bill and remain one. I think the intent of the bill as a whole is sound and good, and I intend to support the bill. The issue we found once we got it across the filing deadline was there are a handful of what we think are unintended consequences, and I think this is sort of the point of this part of the discussion. I've got at least one relatively new business in District 19 that doesn't fall under any of the clear categories available under Tennessee Code Annotated that would give us this new authority. And so we were looking originally at creating a new category of exceptions for them. It is basically similar to a cigar bar or one of the other categories where they would offer, a legal type of cannabinoid vaping with cartridges and in, vaping devices supplied by the establishment. And it is unlike a general purpose place where you might experience secondhand smoke. This is one of the, a cigar bar or one of these other places. The entire point of coming there is for this experience. We've talked about hookah bars as this has come up, this kind of scenario. I do think it is reasonable to allow them to continue operating under their original business plan, and so I offered this amendment. I know it's pretty broad. I actually think the amendment itself is too broad, but we didn't originally have a way that we were clear from our own legal counsel, and Metro Legal was going to allow protection of this business. I don't really want to run this amendment I've got a late filed amendment that gets us back to something that I think is similar to the pathway for hookah bars. I do want to hear from the sponsor. It sounds like there may be some other legal points to be made. So I am comfortable with this committee either not making a recommendation on this and we just bring it up conditionally on the floor if we don't get as far as we think on some of the other stuff. But my intention would be to actually, some of you all might have already seen the late filed amendment that would just create a new category of vapor bars and try to carry it forward that way rather than creating a larger, broader exclusion for vaping. So that's the explanation of the amendment. I don't personally need the committee to recommend it right now. I think we can have the bigger discussion on the floor depending on where we think the overall legal conversation is. My main intent in this amendment is not to broadly exclude vaping. It's to narrowly protect a relatively new type of business also now possible under state law.
Comments?
For our legal advisor, basic difference between these two?
So Amendment 3, filed by Councilmember O'Connell, would eliminate the definition of vapor product and would eliminate the prohibition against vaping, so that the prohibition in age-restricted venues would only be with regard to smoking tobacco. The late filed amendment that Councilmember O'Connell has also filed, that would follow the state's carve out for cigar bars. So the state has that carve out for cigar bars saying if you are a legal establishment, you only allow smoking of cigars, then you are exempted from a prohibition against smoking. So here it would be the same, where if you are a legally established vapor bar, and it kind of creates this definition of vapor bar, a legally established vapor bar, you only allow vaping. Sometimes I get confused about the terminology because this is kind of a new area, but you only allow vaping in your establishment and not smoking tobacco or cigars or what have you, then you would be permitted under this carve-out and this exemption.
So would you agree, I think I heard Councilman O'Connell say that he thought late amendment was probably a little more narrowly focused.
It is more narrowly focused. It's focused on the establishments that would fall under the definition of vapor bar, as opposed to any establishment allowing vaping.
To be clear, we timely filed a version of that amendment that we weren't 100% sure yet legal would be satisfied with, right? And so in the interim, we filed Amendment 3, and then we got updated guidance from legal, but we were already here, and so this is why that version of it is late filed. So we did have a timely filed version of the same amendment that I would prefer to offer. It just had not yet kind of met the test of Metro Legal. So my recommendation to committee would be prefer the late filed amendment. It's late filed and we'll have to pass the objection test, but that'd be my recommendation.
Then
I don't want to withdraw it yet because I need to make sure we may need it considered if we can't get approval to run a late filed amendment.
I would move, Mr. Chairman, for no recommendation on Amendment 3 at this time.
Second.
Comments? Is that a valid motion?
I don't know if we need to move on to
You just don't make a recommendation.
take it up, right?
You just don't make a recommendation. It's not a-
Amendment can withdraw their
We
motion.
don't vote
So,
on it.
Can we take it to the floor?
I think it's good. It's not
Can the
action to
person
take
who
it to the floor.
made the motion to put it on the floor withdraw their motion? Is that the appropriate way to go about doing it?
I believe that the committee needs to take some action in order for it to go to the floor.
With legislation.
So we have a
Can we
first and a
just vote
second.
5-5?
We have a first and a second to move this amendment. So could the committee ostensibly all just abstain?
I've just conferred with the vice chair of the Rules Committee. Who reminds me that it's legislation, so ordinances and resolutions need action, but amendments would not need a recommendation to move before. So you can just not make a recommendation for anything for this, and
I
it could
withdraw
still
my
be
motion.
Sorry.
There you go.
Apologies.
Any other comments on Amendment 3? We're recommending to not recommend. Okay. On to Councilmember Swope's amendment for grandfathering. Can I get a motion
So moved.
Second.
and a second? Thank you very much. Councilmember Swope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we've already passed Councilmember Parker's, I would like to withdraw this and sign on to Parker's.
All right, very
Now
good.
I've seen everything.
No other action needs to be-
That's frozen over.
No other action needs to be taken on that.
Politics makes strange.
Okay, so a late filed amendment, we can still take it, but it needs to go to rules,
It'll
obviously.
still have to go to Rules Committee.
Okay, so this is a late filed amendment. Okay, thank you. I have a first and a second on Councilmember O'Connell's late filed amendment.
And I'll defer to the chair. I mean, Mr. Chair, if you've got guidance that suggests that this might not be necessary for this classification, that's fine. Otherwise, I think this is a fairly narrowly tailored amendment. It does affect a single category of business where, I think, again, if we're talking about the public health dimension of the bill as originally filed, this is a new category of legally operating in a relatively new business space under cannabinoids that I think is reasonable, and I think it avoids pulling the rug out from under this this particular establishment in District 19. But should they choose to expand in Davidson County, grandfathering wouldn't be enough to take into account new establishments. My personal take is this is narrowly crafted enough that it would not injure the intent of the bill as filed, which I still support. Unless the chair has other guidance, I'd encourage committee members to support.
I do have comments and some questions, but I'll take comments and questions from committee members first. Okay. Director Darby, state law says that if your establishment has a retail component of a certain degree or whatnot, that you are automatically carved out.
Wait, say that again. State law says,
There's a retail component
Yes.
that carves you out.
yes.
So if these establishments have a certain level of product that they sell, how would we determine that that meets the threshold? And could they claim that exemption? So in other words, would this even be necessary if the business can do that?
One second, I'm looking at the.
That'll come to help.
So the retail carve-outs rely on a phrase that says that the establishment derives the largest category of sales from tobacco products and accessories, or the largest category of sales from vapor products and accessories. So I think that if it's, and there's no definition of retail store, that may be somewhere else in the code under, I don't know, business taxes or business licenses or something. But I don't know, it would depend on whether they derive the largest category of sales from the sale of tobacco products or vaping products.
And there really is no audit component or a comptroller involvement in determining that, really, right? Okay. Health Department, I would like you all to chime in on the nature of the product and whether it's as harmful or not, and whether it should have its own carve-out.
When there is a vast universe of data about how bad cigarette smoking is for you. As Councilman O'Connell noted, this is a newer methodology for delivering nicotine and various other substances. It is largely unregulated. There are substances in some of those cartridges that are really bad for you, that are probably worse than nicotine. So the Board of Health is on record as encouraging everyone to default to an assumption of harm until more is known about those products. And the state also encourages you to consider, when you're talking about smoking, to consider vaping and e-cigarettes and all that, and similarly situated things with tobacco smoking, cigarette smoking.
Clarifying question, when you're saying that product, are you referring specifically to vapes and e-cigarettes, or are you referring to like cannabinoid products?
Any of the electronically or vaporly delivered substances. If some may be, I don't know which one is worse for you. There's a thing called popcorn lung, which I think comes from vaping primarily. The original batch of e-cigarettes that came just flooded everywhere not too long ago. There were some tests of the substances, and it was completely unregulated. And there was some formaldehyde and rat poison. I mean, there was all kinds. It could have been anything. And I'm not accusing anybody of doing that. I'm just saying that as long as it's unregulated, you don't know what's in there or how bad it could be for you. So the board has said that you should default to an assumption of harm until we know for sure that it's regulated, and it's, at least if it's not safe, at least you know what the risks are.
Councilmember O'Connell, my question would be, what would be the difference in this business in asking customers to go outside to smoke than any other restaurant or bar that has more traditional smoking?
Right, so a couple things I'll note. One, in speaking to legal representative of the business, the business plan was, hey, we're gonna allow these cartridge delivery mechanisms on tables as a part of the experience, right? So it's not the same thing as taking a thing you can take in your hand and go out back for a smoke. It is intended to be consumed with a cartridge delivery mechanism that is owned and provided by the establishment, right? So it's not either a BYO scenario. They deliver the cartridges, they deliver the cartridge delivery, and it is intended to be a part of the experience of the establishment. And I think that's where I would say it is more akin to the the cigar bar where patrons would be going there specifically to experience that, more so than, hey, we're going to a place that serves beer and happens to allow smoking, right? And so I agree with Metro Public Health. I'm not going to stand up here and say this is good for somebody's health, but rather than if I want to go to meet my friend somewhere at a bar and I have to decide, hey, is this a place that allows smoking, which obviously used to be much more common in Nashville than recently, and this is why I appreciate the bill going even further in what we will regulate. This is basically saying, hey, I am going to gather with friends at a place that has a very specific purpose, and that purpose includes these devices and these cartridges.
Any other comments?
Can I ask a question? So that is his business model.
Correct.
So, but the amendment would not specify, would it, that you have to be that tightly controlled if anybody, so you can come in here and vape?
We had a conversation about should the definition actually include those provisions of the establishment providing the mechanism of delivery in the cartridges. I'm personally comfortable with that. I don't think that made the final language. And, you know, again, I'm happy to refine this. This is kind of a how small can we open the door kind of question to keep this particular type of business viable.
And that would be my question, Mr. Chairman, is as written, even if this is let's say, the safest way to go about this business, it is not restricted to that safest way to go about that business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In other words, just to clarify what you're saying, this particular amendment basically permits cartridge delivery systems anywhere moving forward?
Just real quickly to clarify, I think item 4 speaks to it, though. It doesn't permit vaping or smoking of cigars, cigarettes, or products containing tobacco, right? So it is even narrower in that regard. It just, I mean, theoretically, you could bring your own cannabinoid cartridge in, and but it's
apparently would permit cannabinoid vaping
anywhere
in any 21 and up establishment. Apparently, as I understand it.
Okay, so just to be absolutely clear, and Director Darby, you might want to address this one. This amendment basically legalizes weed while we're at the same time trying to abolish tobacco. Is that correct?
This amendment does not legalize weed.
Okay, it legalizes the delivery of cannabis-related products.
This amendment establishes what a vapor bar is and would exempt a vapor bar from the prohibition against smoking in age-restricted venues.
So yeah, it legalizes it.
So if it's an over 21 establishment, it could be considered a vapor bar if they derive a portion of their income from the sale of vapor products or accessories, and it does not permit vaping or smoking of cigars, cigarettes, or any products containing tobacco.
Wow.
It does not say nicotine.
May I ask a question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and I know you've got a committee. Yeah, I'll let the committee.
I gotta go to rules now.
Right.
Would, if the state were to pass medical marijuana next session, would that open the door for?
This is not a medical use, right? So I don't know that it would. I mean, it would. My guess is everything on the state side, that would not apply to this because this is a recreational, Mr. Chair, we do have a representative of the establishment present if the committee would want to hear from him.
That's fine. I think we understand the business and all that.
I own 14 dab bars, which are vapor bars. We're called the Holistic Connection, and we're all over Metro. We do not allow vaping or smoking of any tobacco products in our establishment. You have to be 21 and up to come in. all devices and products that you consume have to be bought on site. All my products have passed Department of Agriculture testing on all phases. We actually do a lot of testing after that. So you can't smoke cigarettes, and these are only hemp-derived products. We do not allow obviously anything marijuana, and nothing marijuana is in this. This is completely hemp-derived cannabinoids. So CBD and hemp-derived THC, which is legal under the 2018 federal farm bill. So this I don't allow live music. I don't allow smoking. I test all my products. I don't allow people to bring in outside products. So even though this gentleman's right, they don't mandatory regulate us, but we go extremely above and beyond. I've helped MTSU do $2.5 million worth of cannabinoid research with 8 PhDs. We worked on it for 4 years. We did living tissue trials and mice trials. So I know this stuff pretty good. So we're trying to regulate it the best we can, and kind of what we do has nothing to do with smoking and smoking tobacco.
Mr. Jones? So, just so I can be clear, this late amendment would allow for his business to but it would also allow vaping in any 21 and up bar.
If they derived a portion of their income from the on-site sale of vapor products and accessories.
I mean, it defines vapor bar and has criteria for that.
But yes.
So you feel
I could not come up with a narrower way to allow them to operate under the bill as filed. To the sponsor's point, I mean, there is a chance that they could pass an audit, but I would feel less comfortable having a CPA work that out with the state than just to go ahead and create a carve-out.
Any other comments on this? My comments would be I can't support it. I don't think it's as narrow as it's described to be. I think it opens up a Pandora's box. Yes, council member.
Thank you. Question for the sponsor. If we didn't put this amendment on the bill, would this establishment be able to continue to operate your current business model under the bill?
Not as filed. We think there is they might be able to operate, but if the state came knocking or somebody else came knocking, right? Basically, if a regulatory entity empowered under Tennessee Code Annotated came along, they could effectively coerce cessation of that particular element of the business.
I don't know if this is for Director Darby or for the sponsor, but in an effort to make it even more narrow, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on this to the sponsor, and sounds like an amazing business model, and I would definitely love to see that continue to operate. Is there any way to carve out, to make this a little more narrow so that it is specifically for hemp-derived
cannabinoids.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
HDC. We gotta give a new acronym for it. But is there a way that we can make it even more narrow so that it is only for the hemp-derived products, Director Darby, or to the sponsor?
We could add a fifth item, I suppose, to the definition of vapor bar.
It's possible to add that. I think it would be possible to add that in there. We were trying to make it more focused on just vaping in general because of the way the state law is written. The state law is directed, the state law authorizes local governments to regulate smoking and vapor products. And so we were trying to keep it focused on that.
I'm open to it if we could have Metro Legal effectively say, this is fine, right? I mean, we think this is consistent with Metro Legal's interpretation of current state law.
Director Darby, is that true?
they have stated that, that it would be that they believe it would be constitutional to have this, these carve-outs if there is a, rational basis articulated as to why the carve-out would be necessary. I think on the hookah bars, we have the cultural explanation, and here the explanation is for the, the vapor businesses.
Is there an appetite for this to be a bill outside of an amendment to this bill? And the reason I ask you, so we're looking at tobacco in this bill and smoking, and this seems that you're creating more regulations around another product.
The bill changes the landscape in such a way that it made sense to me to amend the impact of the bill. I'm fine with coming back. I mean, if the amendment fails, that's what I will do, because I think, my sense is in following the arrival of this business into District 19 and knowing that the dab bar concept exists around the city, I don't object to it. I'm not trying to regulate them out of existence. Right?
To follow up on Councilmember Taylor's comment, which I think is well taken, since we already have the amendment down here that this will not be implemented until March 1, would you be willing to set this aside and do a separate piece of legislation? You have about 5 months in order to craft that?
It is, I guess I would continue to be concerned that the bill as filed would send a signal that the council is saying, pending that other legislation without knowing anything else about the will of the body, like if this bill were to pass as filed, we would be saying these businesses are expected to shut down until and unless we make other provisions to allow them to continue operating. That's my concern.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. I have one more question. I'm still trying to, this is very sensitive and nuanced, and I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it. So with the amendment, with the amendment for a vapor bar, could this then be an establishment, could this open it up where there are now establishments that are 21 and up, alcohol consumption allowed on site, they're selling just typical, I guess an e-cigarette would then have tobacco. This does not allow regular vapes because of the tobacco?
Correct.
Okay, so that's my concern, because I'm supportive of this, but I'm not supportive of the secondhand vape.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now that I heard that, I can support the amendment, Councilman O'Connell.
Councilmember Mendez.
Boy, you guys are working hard. I was listening on my phone in the other room, and just had to come in on this. I'll probably raise my hand to object to this being late filed. The reason why this is a popular entertainment is because of the THC and the hemp product. And there's just no way that I'm personally getting behind outlawing smoking and then having a carve out for getting high on with THC and hemp products. And so I'm going to object, and so I don't know if anybody else will, but I would suggest this one not move forward.
Vice Chair.
I would just like to say, Chair. I would just like to say that I think there are different health implications from smoking tobacco and smoking hemp, but I am not the medical expert on that. So can the health department weigh in on that at all? Because I've always been under the impression from just what I've read and researched that there are different, that smoking cigarettes as well as e-cigarettes have different health implications than smoking like THC or hemp-derived products. So,
and just to save time while you're answering it, the whole point of the dabs, the vaping, the hemp, product with THC is to get higher concentrations faster. And so whatever the benefit is, if THC is being consumed in higher concentrations faster, that's why it's popular. And that's why there's a bunch of locations. And I'm just saying, if we're gonna have separate legislation where we can talk about this specifically, that's fine with me. But the idea of having on a late filed, this entire conversation on something that's been about tobacco products, that's my issue. And sorry for jumping in on the question, but I think that's a fair add-on, so Tom only has to answer once.
I thought that was a fine answer.
But I still want my question answered.
There's a lot of things that are bad for you about all of these things. It'd be hard for me, I am not a medical professional, but there are issues with any of them, particularly depending on what's in the material, how well it's regulated, how well it's controlled, what it is, how hot it gets, how much it is, how much actual intake you have. Like I said before, there's a universe of data about how dangerous smoking cigarettes is. There is less data about the more recent inventions about vaping and e-cigarettes and so forth. One of the things about e-cigarettes is that it's nicotine. It is a way to get people hooked on nicotine, which Robert and I can both tell you is a hard thing to kick.
I don't want to kick.
But I'm asking
tell you it's a hard thing to kick.
But I'm asking specifically about the hemp-derived products.
I don't know the answer.
So to that point, Councilmember, okay.
Mr. Chair, to Councilmember Minna's points, two points. One, we did have a timely filed version of this that did not, the only reason for late filed was updated guidance from legal after a timely filed version of the same effort. So I can understand the reason for the objection if it is actually about the timeliness of it. If it's about the concept of the bill, then that's different because we did, operationally, we tried to have a timely filed version of it, and the guidance we got from legal did not meet the test of the filing deadline. The second point I would say is, I understand your point about the doing one thing while undoing another. That the bill we are considering is a blanket prohibition that is principally about kind of background establishments that aren't focused on tobacco. In fact, it already has carve-outs for things like cigar bars. Cigar is tobacco delivery, right? It has a carve-out for that. To me, this is no different in that it is a carve-out for a specialized experience rather than a background thing that affects every patron. In this case, the patrons going know exactly why they're going. And if you object to the reason they're going, that's fine, and I get that.
Councilmember Gamble.
Yes, I just wanted to say my concern about not adding this amendment to the bill is that it could, and then maybe I can get a confirmation from Director Darby, that it would, as it stands without the amendment, prohibit these, the business model or the businesses that offer these non-tobacco vapor products. So as the bill as written, it doesn't specify tobacco. It just says vapor.
The bill as currently written just places a prohibition on smoking and vaping.
Doesn't matter what.
Doesn't matter what you're
So that's
vaping.
my concern about not adding this amendment, because then you are jeopardizing the businesses that are popular or not, that the business model that they've started. I mean, you're basically killing their business.
It may sound like a really crazy question, but doesn't Parker's Amendment number 2, don't they participate in the grandfathering clause as well? Making this entire conversation null and void?
Any second location would not.
They would all
Yeah,
fall
fair
under
enough.
September 1st, wouldn't they?
But you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have 14 locations, is that what you said?
So we have 14
across the state and probably like 6 in Davidson County.
Not gonna happen.
So you couldn't have a seventh.
So you couldn't have a 7th?
No, couldn't have a 7th. And just real quick on the health stuff, the reason why he's right, people like the legal THC from the 2018 Farm Bill, but also what it is there's no plant matter. You're only doing the essential oil of the plant, and you're vaping it at a temperature where all the carcinogens burn off. So the temperature is so high that you're actually vaporizing everything. All the bad stuff that you're talking about gets vaporized. It's so
Can't be good for your lungs, that's all I guess.
that's at the temperature.
On the record, do we get Councilmember Swope's question answered on the record?
Yeah, they would be grandfathered in.
I think it would be grandfathered in because it does include the use of vapor products prior to September 1st.
But they couldn't expand.
Right.
Correct.
Any other comments, questions on this late filed amendment? All right, well, let's go ahead and take a vote on it then. All in favor of this late filed amendment? 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, I'm in favor.
4. Against? 2. And any abstentions? 1, 2. So it's 4 in favor, 2 against, and 2 non-voting. All right, so we have the bill as amended. Amendment 1 is 8 in favor, 0 against. Amendment 2 is 5 in favor, 2 against, 3 not voting. No recommendation on 3, withdrawn 4, and the late amendment is 4 in favor, 2 against, 2 not voting. So all in favor of the bill as amended with amendments 1, 2, and the late filed amendment, say aye. Against?
Of course, I'm going to vote no.
Oh, no.
You damn hypocrite if I did.
Against? Right, so how many in favor?
In favor.
1, 2, 3, 6.
In favor of the bill,
It's all y'all versus
7. Okay. 7. Bill passes 7 in favor, 1 against. All right. Thank you very much. Hang on, don't leave.
Say we got two.
Two more. BL 2020.
We should have adjourned.
2022-1411, Benedict Porterfield, Sepulveda, and others, adds a new section to the Metro Code related to family planning services. Can I get your motion?
Second.
Comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I say one thing before we go to another bill, and I'll get out of your hair and let you do business. I'm Jeff Meeks, owner of the Batter's Box, and I've been sitting here this evening listening to
Sir,
the vaping being experienced.
Sir, we do have, I'm sorry, I can't. I've got to kick it up.
You wouldn't indulge me less than 2 minutes?
I cannot. I've got to get procedurally done. The bill passed.
All I'm saying is that the smoking bars is an experience in itself, and if there's that few of them, and we're talking about people that are 21 years and older, why not let people make their own decisions on those things? And if a bar wants to be non-smoking, be non-smoking.
Well, remember that
But you don't go to an adult bookstore looking for better homes and gardens.
I'm going to move on now. You're according to this bill, you're grandfathered in.
That's beside the point. But thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you. I appreciate the phone conversation we had. So, Councilmember Porterfield, you're on the bill. Do you want to carry it?
I would like to hear it.
All right. So, comments on the bill?
Director Darby, can you address the bill and if there are any additional questions on it?
The bill would provide for free of charge to the patient, family planning services, birth control counseling services, and it would provide for certain birth control products to be provided free of charge to the patient, but nothing, the birth control products would not include the long-acting restrictive contraception, reversible contraceptives. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did we defer this in budget?
It was deferred in budget.
I move that we defer this. How long was budget? 1 meeting? I move that we defer this 2 weeks.
Second.
All in favor of a 1 meeting deferral?
Aye.
Any against? Favor, 0 against on that. And finally, BL 2022-1413, Road and Gamble, Syracuse, and others. There's an agreement between the Mental Health Cooperative and the Davidson County General Sessions Court Division 2 for the purpose of ensuring the provision and implementation of a competency restoration specialty docket.
So moved.
So moved. Second. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you so much, everybody. We are stand adjourned.
So it's like, trying to 65 in the parking lot.